Hi, thanks and welcome to the show. If you were a subscriber to me on YouTube, thanks for your support and you are welcome. If you are new to the channel, then you're also welcome, and I would ask you to consider subscribing because it's free and it means that you can get automatic updates of any new material that I post. And of course, you can contact me through YouTube at any time with any of your questions and comments, and suggestions for future shows are always welcome. But we've got a handful this week and for the next two shows because there's not a lot good to say about lockdown, but it does give you a bit more time on your hands. My business has been affected just like everybody else, and my life and everything. So I'm going to do my best not to mention any of this stuff, make this a virus-free webinar, because there's plenty of other webinars going on at the moment that are full of viruses where you can catch up on the things that if you're really interested in that. But the title is, and the stuff that I've been working on for the last month or 6 weeks or so, is what I call the four monsters. And these are friendly monsters, and they're the four things that I've learned over the years, both working in the corporate sector and as a mind coach and as an elite performance coach, that I've chosen because they are powerful and they are simple, and you don't need to spend a load of money on getting trained. You don't need years of experience. In fact, last week we talked about havening, which is a psychosensory technique, and we were all doing havening during the show, and we all got some immediate benefits. And of course, this is something, the self-havening, which is the arm stroking thing that Justin Bieber has given a lot of legs to, because he uses it for helping him with some issues that he has, according to his partner. And I told you the story about how I used a very similar technique with a dragon lizard. So those of you who follow my work will know that I'm a mind coach, that I say that we've all got lizard brains. We're all a lot more like reptiles than we like to believe. We have a veneer of civilization, thankfully, but our base emotions are pretty primitive, and things like fear and survival are the most primitive of all. And we're going to touch on some of those things. So because today's friendly monster is a technique called HeartMath. And I've been using it for about 10 years. I have been trained. I'm a trainer in HeartMath. And the beauty of HeartMath is that it's quick, it's simple, it's highly effective, and it's open for everyone. It's a program that was rolled out originally in the States. It's a form of meditation, and it's been adopted by many schools. It's used in prison. It's used by the military. It's used by a lot of sports people, and that's how I got introduced to it, because at that time I was spending a lot of time working with professional golfers, and they found it very helpful to provide relaxation. In a nutshell, as I mentioned, HeartMath is a form of meditation, and many of you will meditate. There are many different schools of meditation. I'm not going to go through what all of those would be. The important thing, as with all of these things, is to find what works for you, because what works for me may not necessarily work with you. So my job is just to give you some little nudges, and as always, make things as simple as I can, because probably the biggest issue Homo sapiens has is when we get a simple idea, which is brilliant, we then try and make it more complicated and give it fancy names and long words. And that often moves us in the wrong direction. Lots of research has been done on the benefits of meditation, and it's been proven to be effective at reducing stress. And certainly in the Western world, stress is literally a killer. There's way too much of it around. We know from the medical point of view that it affects our cardiovascular systems. It makes people more liable to strokes, to blood pressure, possibly to diabetes, to cancer as well, because some forms of cancer at least are partially related to stress. And perhaps worst of all, which perhaps underpins all of those things, is that it flattens or weakens our immune system. So many good reasons why we should all find little quiet times in our day for a spot of meditation. And HeartMath is no probably no more or less than that, um, except it's simple. Everybody can use it. Anybody can use it anywhere. And that's why we're going to talk about it on the show today. Here's a kind of off the wall, out of the box idea to get you thinking about it. Our brains, I'm the mind, I'm a mind coach, I'm a medical doctor by background, but when I was a student, I couldn't decide whether to be a surgeon or a psychiatrist, and I chose a surgical path. And now I've got the opportunity. I'm not to be a psychiatrist, but at least to explore the mind. So, our mind, we've only got one, apparently. But then there are people who say that we don't. They say that we have got a lot of nervous tissue in our heart. And fair enough, lots of neural pathways going from the head to the heart. The brain is all powerful, billions and trillions of cells running our lives for us. But the strange thing is it's now been found that a lot of these neurons, these nerve pathways, are going from the heart to the head, not the other way around. And of course, if we listen to people speaking, they can kind of give us a hint of that. Because very often, particularly in the kind of work that I do with people, will say, Steve, I just couldn't make a decision. My head wanted to do one thing, but my heart wanted to do something else. So there we are, there's a conflict. And whenever we have any conflict between two brains, for want of a better term, then we're going to make bad decisions. And we're not going to feel good about whatever decision we make. And it doesn't end there, because we now know there's an awful lot of nervous tissue in the gut. So we've got a brain in the gut as well, and lots of communication between the heart, the brain, and the gut, and indeed probably all of the other organs of the body. And those of you who follow the work of Deepak Chopra, he goes even further. He says that every cell in our body, of which we have trillions, they all have brains as well, or at least nervous tissue. So what does this have to do with HeartMath? Well, I'm going to keep the science here to an absolute minimum. But we have a conscious mind, which is small, and an unconscious mind. I'm sorry about the noise by the moment. We have a huge storm raising here, and you can probably hear the rain falling on the roof. But I'll speak up a little bit and speak a little slower. Hopefully this will have gone in the next few minutes. And in that big, powerful unconscious mind, which is where I do all my work, which is where the pay dirt is, because that's the bit of the mind that even if we can manage to access a little bit of it, it ignites and releases a huge amount of thinking power. So the unconscious mind, it has a sympathetic system and a parasympathetic, and they literally are in balance, or they should be, like everything in nature. That's the way it's designed. The sympathetic nervous system is sometimes referred to as fight and flight. It works instantly. It releases massive amounts of chemicals like adrenaline, cortisol and stuff. And it makes us very strong, very fast. It makes us think very quick. And as the name says, fight and flight. It prepares us for one of those two options. The trouble is that in our society, we release a lot of these chemicals all of the time because they come from fear and they come from anxiety. And we are not there to kill the person who's threatening us. I mean, how can we? We're worrying about an interview with the boss, or we're worrying about a driving test or something like that. We have to sit. So all of these chemicals are being released, and that's why we get a fast pulse, we feel sweaty, pains in our stomach, and we've all been there. And that puts us out of balance. That's why I'm giving you this background information. The sympathetic and the parasympathetic. If the parasympathetic is overloaded, then it affects the function of the parasympathetic. So what does the parasympathetic do? Some of the scientists say that it's rest and digest. It's a calming influence. The sympathetic goes to most all of the major organs of our body. It activates the smooth muscle, like the smooth muscle we would have in our guts and stuff like that. So rest and digest. But it also, as I said, it has effects all over the body, and that's why it's sometimes called feed and breed, digestion, and it's involved in our breeding behavior. So to all of us, another analogy or metaphor here is it's like we've been given a Ferrari. Our body is a Ferrari, and we have an accelerator pedal, which is the sympathetic, and we have a brake, which is the parasympathetic, and we're driving the Ferrari with our feet on both brakes. So what HeartMath claims to do, and as far as we know what it does do, is it helps us to balance these conflicting things and to bring the sympathetic and the parasympathetic working together. And when you do brain scans of people doing HeartMath or practicing forms of meditation, you can see their brain waves syncing. So there's good background to that. The thing that people, I'll be getting into some practical stuff, by the way, but this is just to give you a little bit of information about HeartMath for your own interest, and also because other people are going to probably ask you questions about it. When we get the sympathetic and the parasympathetic in balance, it means that whatever we're doing, whether we're giving a talk, whether we're playing a sport, whether we're writing a book, or even reading a book for that matter, we become a little bit, lose sense of time. We certainly lose sense of the normal day-to-day worries that usually occupy our minds, and we give our best, and we're also happiest. The athletes know this better than anybody, because they call it being in the zone. And to a sportsman or woman, to find the zone, to stay there longer, that really is the holy grail. And that's how there's armies of coaches who are there to try and help them to do just that, with varying degrees of success. What HeartMath helps us to do is to bring these into balance, as I mentioned, and they mention something called heart rate variability. And any kind of superficial search of the literature, you'll see heart rate variability mentioned all of the time. And let's say, for example, just to make the numbers simple, if my resting pulse rate is about 60, which it is, or a little lower, 72 is considered normal for a man, a middle-aged man, and perhaps a little faster for a woman. Heart rates vary, obviously when we exercise, when we're stressed, when we're ill, all kinds of reasons why they go up and down. So if my heart rate is 60, that would mean 60 beats per minute, which you might imagine would mean 1 heartbeat every second. Well, came as a bit of a surprise to me, but it's not quite like that, because the gap between every heartbeat can vary a little bit, just by fractions of a second, and that is what's called heart rate variability. And there's a sweet spot in heart rate variability where people find the zone. And there are bits of computer software now that people can use. There's apps they can put on their iPhones, and it's quite easy to measure your heart rate variability if that's what you're interested in. So that is what we do. That's what HeartMath promises. That's what HeartMath delivers. And now perhaps I can give you a little story, and just to give Greg a heads up, once this story is over, Greg, I'm going to ask you about your experiences with HeartMath. I stumbled into the world of professional poker about 5 or 6 years ago. Apart from playing poker socially with family and stuff occasionally, I'm not a poker player, although I have since then become quite interested in it, because I started to work with a few professional poker players who are, some of the top people in the world, and we got some pretty good results. And they talked to each other, and sooner or later I was introduced to a player called Chris, and he, by his standards, was not doing very well. And he'd been persuaded by a friend of his who had and was working with me at that time, and said, why don't you at least speak to Steve, see what he has to say? You might get something from it. So Chris and I did speak, and he's from England, but he lives in Las Vegas, and he spends a lot of time touring the world, where they have these wonderful poker resorts. So we looked at our diaries. This was in January, and we weren't going to be able to synchronize our diaries. But I didn't want to let this opportunity slip. He said, we pinned down a date in July that might just be possible. Well, I know that in the world of poker, it's in the moment. They often don't know what they're doing next week, let alone 5 months from now. So I said, okay, well, where are you going to be a week from now? And he said, I'm going to be in Vancouver. And so I said, okay, I got the exact dates. And then I said, I'll see you there, Chris. And I put the phone down, or I pressed the button on the Skype. I think we were using Skype at that time. And so I didn't really give him a chance, but I traveled to Canada. I got in touch with him, and to cut a very long story short, a story which is in a book that I wrote, by the way, called Poker Genius. And the reason why I can talk about this is because Chris has been the subject of some TV programs, and he talks openly about the kind of work. So we worked together. We had 2 sessions a day for 3 days, and HeartMath was one of the things that we did, because on my computer I have the software, and I have the thing that measures the pulse and gives the heart rate variability, and I have the graphs. And Chris's background is in economics, so he's got a bit of a mathematical brain, and he liked to be able to see the graphs and plot his progress. And on the last day, he scored on this HeartMath program 99%. And I said, wow, that's pretty good, Chris. How do you feel? And he said, well, I feel a bit frustrated because I didn't get 100%. And I laughed and I said, well, look, you're the first person who's ever got a score like that in just 3 days' work. So I said, don't worry about it. And what he wanted, you see, the main reason why Chris wanted to work with me was because he'd never won a major. I mean, to a golf player or a tennis player, we all know that majors, that's their legacy. If they haven't got at least one major in their career, they feel they haven't really done themselves justice. So Chris hadn't got a major in the world of poker. So as I left for the airport after he got his 99%, I said, look, I can't predict what's going to happen in the world of poker. It's impossible to predict because there's a lot of luck, however good a player you are. So the only thing that I can tell you is that your head is in a good place now compared to where we were 3 days ago. So I pretty much forgot it. I flew home. I was working with other things, until I got a message about 3 weeks ago, and he said, Steve, have you been following the poker? And I said, no, I haven't, but how have things been going? He said, well, the next event I went into, it was a 5-day one in San Francisco, and it was a major, and I won it out of 10,000 people that had entered, and I won $1,054,000. And he said, I'm very grateful. I'm going to carry on using the techniques you use. And even though we hadn't had a contract or anything, I didn't ask him, but he sent me some money. And of course, that paid for my airfares and hotels and a bit on top of that. And we're still working together. And Chris is still doing well. He's the world #1 champion in online poker. So Greg is, I'm going to introduce Greg. I've known Greg for about 2 or 3 years. We're colleagues and friends. We've collaborated on various projects and still do. And just before lockdown, Greg was asking me about my experiences with HeartMath, and I told him, and by the way, this is not a paid product placement or anything like that. I don't make recommendations for anything if I haven't bought it and paid the full price and used it myself for quite a long time and know that it's worth having. So I didn't tell Greg that. I just said, well, I think it's worth exploring. So I think my understanding is that he went ahead and he bought something. I think it's for the computer. And I'm going to ask him, well, my first question is, Greg, I hope you're not going to let me down. I hope you're going to tell me you just won $1 million.
Yes, I have, Steve.
Oh.
Thanks to you and HeartMath. I just wanted to share with all of you. No, I'm joking. I'm just just watching the beautiful rainbow, right? Actually, two rainbows right in front of my windows. So yes, I purchased the HeartMath 2 months ago or so. It was a pretty cool experience, really, because what Steve was explaining about HeartMath and what it does. So just by applying those simple exercises, which are deep, proper breaths, focusing your attention on your heart area and changing your thoughts into positive ones. Just by that, and right in that very second, you switch. I can see on my software, on my laptop, using the software, the HeartMath software that I bought, changes. And so the heart rate variability, which Steve explained briefly, rises. And when it rises, it just gives you, it makes your heart and your brain and your body in sync. And when that is in sync, then your body is at your optimal level, which means whatever you do, you just perform at the highest level possible at this very moment. Does that answer your question, Steve?
Yeah, it does. That's a full question. And I just wanted to get, I've been doing it, as I say, for 10 years, and I guess I'm a bit blasé about HeartMath. It's embedded, really. In fact, it's so embedded, I often do it unconsciously, even if it's only for 30 seconds, doing this breathing technique that I'm going to go on. So I thought I would ask Greg, because he's new to it, and he'll confirm that I haven't asked him how he's been getting on the last 6 weeks, but I had a feeling that he would like it, and I'm glad to hear that he does. It'd have been a bit embarrassing if he had said I've wasted 200 pounds or something, Steve, and I feel worse. Anyway, fortunately you didn't, Greg, so thanks for sharing your views on that. Time for me to first of all give you my simplified version of how I use HeartMath. Now, if you do receive any professional training, you may well get told some slightly different stuff, but I don't think anybody, the experts, would argue with my rather simplified version right now. The first thing, as Greg said, is that it's a breathing that's focused around the heart. So if you can just about see on the screen here, over your breastbone, that is roughly where your heart is. Actually, it's a little bit more to the left as well, but that close enough is good enough. And for the purpose of this breathing exercise, I want you to imagine that you're actually breathing in through your heart. So just focus on that for a few seconds now. Just like, you can even put your hand on your heart if that helps you. Okay, it doesn't get too much more complicated than that. There's just another little thing for you to keep in mind. You're keeping in mind that you're breathing through the heart. And the second thing is that we're going to activate positive emotions. Generally speaking, human beings are much better at remembering bad stuff and thinking about bad stuff than good stuff. Well, this is going to be a stretch, but we're going to do this the other way around. I want you to think of something or somebody that gives you a warm glow. It might be somebody you love. It might be an experience that you've had. Greg's just seen his 2 rainbows, the lucky man. All I can see is pouring rain, although it's not as heavy as it was. But think of something that will give you a warm glow. So I've now given you 2 things to think about: breathing through the heart and thinking of a positive emotion. Now, the third and final thing is that the breathing is going to be almost like normal, but not quite. And as another example, I had to have an eye operation a couple of years ago, and I didn't want a general anesthetic, and I said that I could do it just through meditation. And I managed to drop my heart rate to 28, so much so that the anaesthetist wanted to cancel the operation. So I had to explain to her I was meditating. Of course, as soon as I started explaining, it went back up to goodness knows what. Anyway, that's just an example. So it's a slightly different kind of breathing. We're going to breathe a little more deeply than we normally would. And when we come to the end of our in-breath, rather than kind of just holding it, we're going to go straight into the out breath. So we're going to be breathing in and out with no gap at the top or the bottom. And I know you can't really see my hands. And we're going to breathe in and be counting in our head, if we can do that, and think of our heart and the emotion, and we'll be counting to 5. Roughly, everybody will be a little different, but I did say that the breathing is going to be a little slower than normal and a little deeper than normal. So it might be, in my case, I might be breathing in and I'd be counting to myself 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then out again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Something like that. So just practice that right now. You can have your eyes open or closed. It doesn't really matter. If your eyes are open, I recommend that you stare at a fixed point and don't move your eyes right in front of you. Let's just try that for a few seconds, and I'll be trying it with you, and I'll try and show you the rate that I'm breathing at with my hand moving. Even a short period like that can produce a change in your pulse rate. And I'm quite certain that if I was wired up to a sensor right now, even though I'm trying to think of several things at once, my pulse would have dropped. And I'm quite sure that yours would have done as well. So even in just what was that, 30 seconds, that will produce a change. It might only be a slight change, but sometimes a slight change is more than enough. How would it be if you did this for 10 minutes twice a day? Well, I could somebody's probably going to say, do you know how busy I am? I'm a multitasking, I'm a single parent and all the rest of it. When am I going to have 10 minutes without somebody bothering me? Well, it can be difficult for some of us, but I would say that all of us can afford at least 5 minutes. 10 minutes would be better if we can. And then it'll become a habit. And as with all habits that are pleasurable, if we can stick with it for about a month, we'll do it automatically, just like I do. I don't even think of HeartMath every day now, unless I want to wire myself up and do one of these things on the computer. But if I've got something, which could be stressful that I want to do, or something that I want to do to a higher level than perhaps I would normally, I would use this technique for a few minutes. The things that really stress me out are when I have to do live TV, because you can't undo stuff on live TV. And the last thought I always have is, I wonder how many millions of people I'm going out to. And I know that I shouldn't have these negative, stupid thoughts, but it just shows what can crowd in. So if I just stare at the lens of the camera as I'm being counted down, I definitely use HeartMath, just as I am doing now a little bit. Slow things down, calm things down a little bit. Now, as with all of these techniques, they're simple, but even simple as they are, they're not a recipe. Feel free to experiment. Generally speaking, I can't think of anything that you could do with this breathing technique that could in any way be possibly dangerous. So I'm going to throw another one into the bucket here for you to think about. Various cultures stress the importance of the third eye, which is in the midline just above the level of our eyebrows. And indeed, in some cultures, they use special paste or woad or something like that, or makeup, and they paint the third eye on. Some animals do have third eyes, and including, of course, there are some reptiles and fish. And sometimes, even if they don't have them, when you examine their anatomy, you can find little pits in the skull where the third eye might have been. There's a school of thought that the third eye in humans is a direct connection to our pineal gland, which is the smallest gland in the body, was thought to be pretty unimportant, But the neuroscientists now have found out that the pineal gland has a pretty massive blood supply for its small size, and also makes some chemicals they call the joy chemicals. And philosophers have said that the pineal gland is the soul of the body. Now, whether they're right or not doesn't really matter. But an experiment that I make when I'm doing HeartMath is, rather than thinking that I'm breathing through the heart, I try and imagine that I'm breathing through my third eye. Or if that's difficult, I just imagine that I'm breathing through my eyes. That's actually easier. Now, the monster, the friendly monster we're going to be talking about next week, probably, this isn't a promise because things can change, but it might be about healing and self-healing. And certainly when I trained with a person who's a very, very good healer and very famous and has trained thousands and thousands of people, I first had training with him 10 years ago. And last year I decided to have a refresher. I didn't need to for any particular reason. I just thought it might be fun for 3 days. And I can only remember one thing that he said that was really very different. He said, try healing through your eyes. And I did. And it just felt. It felt good. It felt right. But anyway, that's, by the way, let's try now. Just remember the positive emotion. We don't change that. But this time, breathe through the eyes. And this time, it might be better if you do close your eyes. So I'm going to close my eyes too. We'll just do this for about 30 seconds. Okay, well, that's given you all a taste of it. And I'd be interested to know how you got on. So please feel free to use the chat box. And if somebody would like to unmute themselves and talk to the group, you'd be more than welcome. Is this something that I've been able to nudge you towards trying on your own, trying it every day, maybe just for a month, and see where it goes, see where it leads you?
I found it interesting how quickly it worked. You feel that
Okay.
settling.
Thank you, Angela. Is this a technique that you've used before?
I know people who've done it, and I have the app, but I haven't really used it. And I saw they have a special, they're trying to get more coaches in, so they have a special going on right now. So maybe I'll click on it and go through their program.
Why not? And
benefit.
Yeah, thanks for the comment, Angela. And if you could unmute mute yourself again now. Neil, glad you're on the show, Neil. Very calming breathing technique. I'm glad you like that. Is this something you're going to practice, Neil, with you and your clients, perhaps? Yeah, the thing that I was going to say is that HeartMath have what I think is a brilliant website. It's heartmath.org or heartmath.com. I think they've got several ones. And there's a huge amount of resources there. Many of them are free. They are set up as a charitable institution. They obviously have to make their money from somewhere, but it's definitely not a hard sell. And there's all kinds of wonderful presentations you can download and instructions, and kids use this stuff. So you don't have to go on a course, Angela, but I think, I mean, generally speaking, if you have the time and the money, I would always say there's no substitute for a course, because it's great to meet other people. It's great to meet the best teachers there are in the world and swap experiences. I've lost count the amount of money that I spent on training. It would frighten me too much if I knew. But I don't actually regret a cent of it. And but the only rule that I've made is if I'm going to have training, I'll go to the best in the world. So that's really pretty much for this show. I will be editing the video and putting it on YouTube. I will write to you in a few days, and so giving you the link to the video if you want to watch it. And also I'll be giving you details of the next show, which will be the same day, the same time. And it would be great if you can join us again. Again, it's going to be very practical. As I said, it might be healing. That would be the third monster. I only got one to go after that. And just a word to the friendly monsters is they are great. but they're not the answer. They're not the whole answer. They're like Band-Aid solutions. They make us feel better, definitely. And I'm not taking anything away from the benefits. Like I said, I practice them myself. But to me, the real goal is when we use these techniques and the other ones that we've learned over the years, it takes us to a different place, which I call infinite intelligence, or what Carl Jung would call the collective unconscious, and what professional sports people would call, I was playing out of my skin. For once that day, I got out of my own way. It was like somebody else was swinging the golf club, stuff like that. You'll find all kinds of examples like that. And they're given all kinds of different names. So we'll got to do a little more of the work next week on the healing. And the final one, I won't tell you what it's going to be now, but I'll give you a clue. The only reason I can remember all these things is they all begin with the letter H. So they're the 4 H's. I don't see any more questions from anybody. So thanks again for joining us. Truly hope that we all got something from it, and have as great a week as you can next week. Stay well, do all the sensible things, and probably we do have more time on our hands now than usual, so use it on yourself. Indulge yourself with things like this, and reading good books and going for walks, assuming we're allowed out in the country, and all that kind of stuff. So until then, goodbye.